And as you can see on the left side of your screen, looks like officers are moving into place right now. And our Luz Deli Caballero is walking right alongside them. Luz Deli, can you hear us?
Yes, we can absolutely hear you. We were there when the LAPD got the order to go ahead and proceed. As we near Alumni Park, we are seeing that there are still protesters here. They're still making their voices heard. And we do want to note that the Department of Public Safety here at USC gave protesters a warning saying, hey, you have 10 minutes to leave. You're considered to be on private property. And so we're going to give you 10 minutes. And after those 10 minutes, you can be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for violating being here. So it seems like now they are moving in. We are kind of alongside them. Of course, we are being safe about this, but we'll wait and see what happens here as they continue to move closer to these protesters. And again, this has to be handled in a very sensitive way, because earlier we saw when officers stormed in to take the tents from these protesters, instead of leaving, they actually lifted up those tents and they started marching, and they stayed, and that ultimately escalated into one of the protesters being detained, being put in a patrol car, and eventually being released. But we also know that because emotions were so high, this is a very tense subject, that protesters ultimately surrounded that patrol vehicle. You see the LAPD officers storming in, running, and as we go over to the right, we'll see that some protesters are moving, others staying right where they are.
Up here. First officer, pick up on the drill.
And it seems like they're being very strategic about this, trying to be as orderly as they can. I think they're aware that many eyes are on them, you know, in the sky, also on the ground. You all have been making great points of everybody having their cell phones out, not only cell phones, but cameras. And a lot of people are just waiting to see what happens here. So we'll see if they ultimately end up storming Alumni Park, as they said they would, to remove these people. I mean, you see, they have food here. They have a tent set up. They have pizza. And of course, there are protesters all along the side of the neighboring library. So it is going to take quite an effort to get all of these people out that clearly do not want to be removed, and they continue to share their message. It should be worth noting that a message was sent out by the provost earlier, and he was very clear in that while USC does protect free speech, there are rules, and there are rules in place to protect all students involved, saying, you know, the university values freedom of expression and protects the right of every member of our community to express themselves, but there are limits on the time, place, and manner of free expression. And again, the Department of Public Safety made it very, very clear that this is private property, and all protesters needed to leave in 10 minutes. To our right, you are going to start seeing more of those protesters gathering, and again, they're not leaving. They are staying right there. If you see those letter signs that says "Let Gaza Live," they have been there all morning long, and it almost seems like instead of staying at Alumni Park, they're now going to adjacent buildings to continue this protest. So we'll ultimately wait here and see how this all shakes out, but we are seeing that LAPD officers are forming a line. They have their batons out. Some have guns with less than lethal rounds, essentially armed with foam bullets. And we see these coming out in protest. We also saw the LAPD Metro Division on standby should this go south. So again, a lot of things are developing at this time. It doesn't seem like the LAPD has moved closer to these protesters, but they are certainly starting to block things off with this line, batons in hand, and really starting to strategize how it is that they are going to move in and get all of these protesters out.
Delia, and we're counting down that 10 minutes from when police gave that warning. We saw also LAPD officers rush in. It looks like they're creating a perimeter around the protesters. Is that seen from your vantage point? Is that what's happening there? Police forming rather a perimeter around the protest there.
So we are now behind the line observing, and what we saw earlier is that, yes, if you can hear me, we are now behind the police line. We're kind of going in and out, but we can see the perspective of the protesters facing the police line. What we saw earlier when officers initially made contact with protesters when they were removing those tents is that more protesters actually started approaching that line of police officers. And this is the Department of Public Safety of USC. This happened earlier this morning. Right now, I'm anticipating that more protesters are going to start approaching the police line. Again, these officers have their batons in hand, and they were given an order to essentially break this protest down and start filtering all of these people out. And as you can see, there are people that are starting to approach this line. We saw more of this earlier, and things really started going south after protesters started facing police officers and getting closer. So we are going to stay as safe as we can be. But again, you're starting to see that protesters are noticing this line, and it's a line that may start moving forward soon.
It looks like with those protesters locking
at this point, we're starting to move back. They're saying for safety purposes. What was that, Chauncey?
No, I was just going to say, Luz Delia, on the right side of your screen, what we're showing is just protesters locking arms and holding up their signs and not showing any signs of actually moving and heeding those orders, dispersal orders from the LAPD. I want to go back upstairs now to Desmond Shaw for a bird's eye view of Alumni Park and what's happening. Desmond, what do you see from your vantage point?
Well, Susie, we saw there during Luz Delia's report there how LAPD kind of came out with the rapid deployment there where they march in a line and then all of a sudden they kind of scatter in all directions very quickly to try to gain position strategically, you know, as quickly as possible. Kind of frankly throw the protesters off a little bit. They are kind of doing what I was saying, how they're starting to surround it from this side. They really are giving everyone the opportunity here to clear to the north and away from Alumni Park if they want. So it's just every move they're taking is just kind of like a countdown towards being arrested. You know, we saw them earlier, how they came out, kind of made their presence known, then they went back behind some buildings, and now they marched back out, and now they have surrounded the park, and now they're even still apparently giving protesters one more chance there. LAPD's helicopter swooped in really quickly, gave the dispersal order, so they're giving these folks as many opportunities as possible to disperse without incident. And you know, it has worked for a fair number of protesters. Definitely, we saw quite a few more people here in this area, and quite a few scattered as soon as they saw LAs are definitely the most ardent of the protesters that have been out here since this morning. A lot of people with signs. They've really closed ranks here into a circle as I double in, and I apologize. There's just so many trees around here. It makes it very difficult to get any one great angle. But officers now very, very nearby. As I widen out, these people over here, these are just students that have gathered because they want to see how this is all going to go down. I don't believe these were people that have been protesting throughout the afternoon, but obviously this news has spread all across the campus of USC, where there can, you know, tens of thousands of students on any given day. And this is kind of, you know, pretty, almost kind of peak time of classes anyway, or pretty close to it, I should say. So you have, you know, protesters, a lot of students just observing, as well as LAPD, now all of them, you know, getting ready to interact. And I just hope that tempers, you know, don't flare too much here. Hopefully we don't see any bottles being thrown. We've seen that happen in a lot of different situations where something like that happens and it just changes the entire tenor of a protest and how LAPD handles it. Susie.
All right, Desmond, thank you.
We want to go back to Tom Wade. He is also on the ground for us. Tom, what are you seeing from your vantage point?
Well, Chauncey and Susie, it does appear at least a little bit that the crowd is thinning out somewhat. You can take a live look here at the folks that are still in the park. They're locking arms around a group of students who are on the ground. But it's not a huge group. There's a lot of onlookers on the outside of the park kind of looking in, but it may be that some of the people did comply with the order to leave, but just a lot of chanting, people kind of milling about and talking right now. You can also probably hear some of the drumming. It was tense for a few minutes or so when the police moved in and formed a line, but then they backed off and they were ordered to move behind some bushes, some hedges, and they are there right now. Scotty, let's go out and show really how close the police are now. You can see over here where the police are positioned right there by the hedge. So there you get a sense of where they were. They were on the other side of that hedge for a moment, and then there was an order for them to move to the other side. So perhaps police trying to avoid any sort of, tense conflict if it does come to that. We just don't know what will happen. But, yeah, just not a very large group of students here still in the circle. If we want to take another look here at the group, it's not a very large group. There's probably more people looking into the park than there are actually in it at this point. So now I guess the question is, how long do the LAPD officers on the perimeter here, how long do they wait? And do they eventually move in? As I said, the LAPD chopper did make a few circles, a few passes over here, and ordered people out of the park. Very clear, you could hear it over the loudspeaker. But so far, at least a few dozen, I'd say, are still in here and have not left. Again, chanting, very peaceful, nothing right now other than people remaining when they've been told to leave. So, it's kind of one of those tense situations where you wait and see what the police officers do. Oftentimes in these cases, what happens is they move in stages. They get a little bit incrementally closer and closer, and maybe try to sort of pressure the situation into having people getting the idea that something is about to happen. That does have an impact sometimes on people to leave. But right now, it's fairly static. That's kind of where we stand right now. Susie and Chauncey.